Hi there and welcome. It's Tressa Haney. I'm talking to Peggy Chapman, Vice Chair of GANS. I always say GANS, but I want to say Genealogical Association of Nova Scotia because I always want to say GANS of Nova Scotia. I'm here talking to Peggy today because we are going to have a Q&A, which is always a lot of fun. So if you have your questions, please put them in our comment box and let us know, as always, where you're watching from, because everybody is always interested where everybody else is from, and let us know what your connection is to Nova Scotia, because that's also really interesting. As per usual, you can find us on the web at novascotiaancestors.ca, and please go look at the website, join up, become a member. It's on the left-hand side when you get there at Join Us or Renew. And, it's a membership of $39 a year, which is absolutely nothing, but it gets you a lot. So, and we're going to tell you a little bit about what your membership can get you while we answer the questions, because sometimes that comes into play. So, hi, Peggy.
Hi, Tressa. Great to be here.
Yes, I'm glad. You're a wealth of information. I know you're very humble about it, but
don't raise expectations now.
So I see we have a couple of viewers, so I encourage people to say hi so we can see who you are, and let us know where you're watching from. If you are not watching us live and watching us on the replay, let us know that too. Just put the hashtag replay, or I'm watching on the replay, or something like that, because it's always cool. Share this with anybody that you know, maybe on your timeline, because you never know who's looking up their genealogy and have no idea that we're here. And that's the whole point of all of these Facebook Lives, is to provide some information, just a little glimpse into what goes on here, because this is really a gem in HRM, and their website is a gem in the virtual world. So you really should use it. So saying all that, hi, Deborah. Thanks for watching. So we have Deborah Thomas. Let us know where you're watching from. We're always interested. Let us know if you're a member or not, because, membership has its qualities. So, Peggy, what would be the first thing, when we're talking about membership, what would be the first thing that you would say is a benefit of being a member of GANS?
Well, that's an interesting question. I would say the first thing is that you immediately become part of the community of people who have an interest in Nova Scotia genealogy. So you have connections such as through the Facebook page and other ways. You have access to behind the scenes or behind the paywall information that non-members cannot see. And basically, anybody who's a volunteer here at GANS is always willing to go that extra mile for our members. So it's well worth it.
Yeah, I've seen that here. I've seen people come in
today,
right? Just as we were doing it. Yeah, it's nice. Yeah, keep sitting back like that so I can see your face better that way.
Okay.
So Deborah's from Toronto, or living in Toronto, but from Yarmouth. So
yes.
She's a Thomas. Is that your maiden name, Deborah Thomas? Because is that a Nova Scotia name? So we had a question about family files.
Yes.
I think they're really interesting, especially as somebody that doesn't know much about GANS to begin with. To see these family files, I've actually looked through them in the filing cabinet, so they're really interesting. People were wondering, what exactly do you put in a family file? What's the top, 5 things you'd say go in there?
One of the things that you can probably say first about a family file is that there is no set of specific rules. I think, as Tressa showed you last week, it can be just one page or it can be a number of pages, but there's a limit. If it's something that becomes quite large, we would have other options to talk about with you. But if you have a list of a pedigree, can be descendants of one person, and it's printed out from your genealogy software, and you just want to share it, that's great. We will put it in a file. It will be put in our database. If you have a brick wall in your genealogy and you provide us with some details, I just spoke with a gentleman this morning here in the office who that's exactly his situation, and he's going to write up what he already knows and what he doesn't know, and then that would go in our family folders numbers, and the right person might just come along and be able to answer the question that he has. It does get entered into our library database, which, as you know from watching Tressa, it is on the main page of the website under resources, and that's where our library catalog is. So there can be, as I mentioned, there can be any number of things that you think are relevant to other people or relevant to your own research. It could be a transcription of a diary from an ancestor. It could be copies. A new element we have with our Nova Scotia Ancestor Certificate is that people sign to give permission that all the copies of certificates and proof that they showed for their certificate are able to be then put in a family file. Those are wonderful sources. So, as I say, there's no one formula. If you're not sure, you can always contact us at info@novascotiaancestors.ca or give us a call. The phone number's on the website.
Okay. Yeah, that was an interesting group that came in this morning, and sort of
Yes.
you were providing a lot of information for them. So it just goes to show, and I might have missed a little bit, but were they from the U.S. and they came
Yes. They
passing
were from,
through?
they were from Texas,
Yeah.
and they were they had just come from Newfoundland, and
Oh, cool.
the gentleman had ancestors with the Freeman surname. If there are any Freemans out there that have connections to southern Nova Scotia, let us know, because he's looking. And he had a family member who traveled down to Louisiana, he thinks, and then eventually ended up in Texas, which led to his descendancy. And he's doing that research. So we have a lot of Americans that come in here during the summer and early fall.
So it was interesting that he could come in and sit with somebody. I mean, it just happened that you were
He,
here. So
yeah,
we encourage people to actually email in advance. And if
right.
you're a member, that
And he's
so there's
become a
preferential
member
treatment.
since, yeah,
Oh, yeah,
yeah,
good. Like
yeah.
since you've been here today, or
He became a member when he came in, I guess, yesterday,
oh,
and
good.
he signed up a membership, which is why we were able to spend dedicated time with him.
Excellent. See, membership has its advantages.
Exactement.
$39 and you get the ear of like all kinds of information from somebody that knows what they're talking about. And we get to talk about it on Facebook. So if there's any Freemans out there and you are a Freeman or you know somebody or that lineage of any sort, then shoot us up an email or give us a call. Do you know the number offhand, Peggy?
Do you
Or
know,
should we just
I've
send it to the
gone
email?
blank on the phone number, so I
Go to the website. It's all there. It's all there. Don't worry about
I think I know it, but I don't want to give it incorrectly. So
that. Yes, that person wouldn't want a bunch of phone calls about
no.
the Freeman. So if anybody has any questions, please, ask them away, because Peggy is here and she might be able to answer them. So one of the things, I'm just going to ask questions from my point of view as a newbie. One of the things that I found really interesting is that, yeah, sure, people are like looking for their grandmother, their great grandmother, their great great grandmother, whatever. But the stories that are so interesting is how you sort of learn when you start to do research how people moved around in the province, what reasons they moved around in the province. And there's a whole story and there's a whole like culture around certain time periods about why people were doing things. And so that's actually quite an interesting part, more than I think knowing names and putting them
Yes.
on a family tree. So I know that there's several groups, and I alluded to that last week, but to be honest, I could only remember the planters and the
Yes.
loyalists. But I know there's
Everyone
more.
can remember the loyalists. Everyone remembers. Yes.
So I don't know if you want to like just
I can
shed some
say a
light
little
on
bit,
different
because
groups or.
there are a number. It's one way to approach, and what I suggest to many people starting research in a new area that they're not familiar with is to find some, fairly brief history of the location and get a little orientation as to, you mentioned Tressa, timelines are absolutely crucial, because it affects exactly what you said: why people move, why people leave, where they go, how they get there. And so when people come in, for example, I'll go back to our friend from Texas this morning, the relative he talked about, fell somewhat in the era when everybody was a New England planter. Now, New England planters are often get confused with loyalists, and they're not loyalists. The New England planters came before the loyalists, and they're not pre-loyalists either, which is another term that was called. So they were people who were brought in deliberately by the British colonial government to take over many of the agricultural lands that had been deserted, not intentionally, by the Acadians, because they were well known for their very good agricultural skills. And then all of a sudden there was all this empty land. So they went to the colonies in the US, which later became the US, and this was around 1760. And by 1762, over 8,000 people had come from Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, and settled either in the agricultural lands or in other locations. And one point just to make is that planter is not a synonym or term for agriculture. Planters is actually from the Elizabethan era in England and is another term for settler. So you will find that many of the planters, for example, the planters in my family history were actually fishers, not
really?
planter. Yeah, so the area
I
around
actually thought that. I thought that they were
don't worry,
planters. I
don't
thought they were
worry.
literally planting stuff.
No, well, that's fine. And you have plantations. It often was that because that's what people did in that
Yeah.
era, but it doesn't mean they had to be. So the whole area in southern Nova Scotia around Yarmouth and Chebogue and Barrington, these were all people who came from mostly Massachusetts and who were fishers. And because they were mostly English heritage and Protestant, they were deliberately brought by the British government, who was trying to people the land in that regard. So when you have somebody that came in the early 1760s, you think they might have been an American first, they were a planter. The loyalists didn't come until 1783. So there's quite a gap there, and the planters had huge influence on the early days of Nova Scotia, developed townships. You may have heard of township books, and these were developed. This was something they had in New England, and they just brought it with them. And so some of our only records on people's births, marriages, and deaths are in the township books that were brought. So that's one group. And then you have the loyalists. You, of course, have the Irish. It's easy to look at people by groups first, and there's certainly a lot of information out there to help you with that. Other people will look at it by county. So there isn't one way, and it really depends on the situation.
Mm-hmm. So what are the groups? Is there
Okay.
a specific amount?
As I mentioned, the Loyalists, the
Yeah.
population of Nova Scotia doubled when the Loyalists came. Not that it had a huge population to begin with at that time, but it did double. And not all of them stayed. And remember, too, that New Brunswick was part of Nova Scotia in 1783. So
that's what I mean about the story. Sorry to interrupt, but
No,
like when I was like learning stuff like that, I was like, oh right, because the geographical lines weren't what they are now.
Absolutely, and the counties themselves. If you look purely by Guysborough County, for example, at one time what we think of as Guysborough County was called Sydney County. So it wasn't. And we all think of Sydney where it is now. So you have to, that's where it's so important to look at a bit of history and place yourself in context. The groups there were, of course, English, but the English actually tended to not be a huge group. They might have been English via the US, but they were not that many of English from England came and directly stayed. It was more Irish. We had a lot of Irish. And one important thing to note is that the Irish in Nova Scotia were not necessarily post-famine Irish. The Irish in Nova Scotia came way before the famine, and a lot of them actually came via Newfoundland. So, for example, there's a community outside Halifax that Tressa, and where in Prospect, where a lot of the Irish settlers in the late 1700s were pretty much accepted to have come via Newfoundland. So that you have to look at that. Don't
think my ancestors are part Newfoundland. Are you saying?
They didn't stay
they just
in Newfoundland.
Stopped there.
Newfoundland didn't want them. No.
Just landed there for a minute. Yeah.
Another thing is the religious aspect. Is that take the Scots. The Scots, of course, we all know, started coming with the Hector in Pictou County, but they were also at the same time coming where what we call Antigonish now, and they were in Antigonish, and some of them went over to Prince Edward Island, some went up. Cape Breton was not part of Nova Scotia at before 1820. So there's so many factors that you have to take into account. We also have the Germans, of course. The foreign Protestants are a huge overlooked group. I don't think they're as much overlooked now as they used to be, but they're pretty much the Lunenburg settlers who came in 1752. So they've been long standing in the town of Lunenburg, was literally set up to accommodate. The lots were drawn for these people. The Germans have a big history, long history, but they weren't just Germans. There was also in Lunenburg, my foreign Protestant ancestor is from Switzerland, and there were also people from France. So you have to delve into the details. We always think of them as being Germans, but they weren't always Germans. And some of them stayed in Halifax. Then we had, of course, the great Scottish emigration, which went to Cape Breton. And those were mostly Highlanders, and they came as a result of the Highland clearances. We won't go into detail, but you need to look at Scottish history for that. And a lot of times Roman Catholic Scots went to Cape Breton, and the Protestant or Presbyterian Scots went to the Pictou County. Now, there's exceptions to everything, but you can first start with certain assumptions and say, well, there's a story, and I don't know if it's true or not, but there's a story that there was a Protestant reverend from Scotland who, when the Scots were getting off the ships after emigrating, that he would point one way for them to go if they were Protestant and point another way to go if they were Catholic.
So you literally settled by the pointing of a finger.
It wouldn't surprise me, honestly. So, then as time progresses, of course, you get different. For example, in Cape Breton, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, huge influx of Eastern European settlers that were working with the mines and the steel industry, and that is a whole group of people that we don't really have in the mainland part of Nova Scotia, not in those days. So there are groups that you can look at, and let us not forget the Acadians, of course, and the Mi'kmaq, who were here 10,000 years ago. And
I think today is like Acadian Day.
It may be.
I think it is. I saw
God.
that on Facebook. If anybody knows, let us know. I think I heard somebody.
I should know that.
Yeah, that it's Acadian Day today. Yep. So if you do know that, put it in the comments and let us know.
Okay.
Sherry's asking some questions here.
Okay.
Although they need to be a little more specific, I think, Sherry. So a lot of Scottish was the question. Mm-hmm. So in Nova Scotia, I guess you mean, maybe. So maybe if you could clarify that, and a lot of Baptists. So
yes. That's an interesting point, because there was a big influx of Baptist ministers, whatever the term would have been, that did a lot of conversion to the Baptist religion.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yep.
From what? Like Catholics?
No, they were usually of Protestant of some sort. Congregationalists, like some of those planters and loyalists that came were something called Congregationalists, which was a big deal in the U.S. colonies, and they were converted often to the Baptist religion. Oh, which is why you have, the Acadia University in the Valley in Wolfville, which was always known to be the Baptist, associated with the Baptist religion, and that's why, because of the loyalists.
Oh, really? Well, good. Thanks. Shannon Irene says, hi, Peggy. Do you know Shannon Irene?
Yes, I do.
She's saying it with lots of exclamation marks, so I think she must know.
Hi, Shannon. Shannon and I share a number of interests.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
So Jennifer's asking a question here. How can I find birth records for my Irish ancestors from the 1840s?
Well,
is that specific enough?
So are you saying birth records in Ireland or birth records here?
So, okay, maybe you can clarify that. How can I find birth records for Irish ancestors from the 1840s? So maybe she's thinking here, I would think. Anyway, we can move on. If you can clarify that a bit, Jennifer, that'd be great. And we'll come back to it.
Because, it's not anything 1840s, not easy.
Oh, really?
It's church records. It's church records, whether you're in Ireland or in Nova Scotia. Although there are some excellent books that we have here in the GANS library that show a lot of records that were done by Terence. These are books that where Terence Punch did the collection and transcription. There's 3 or 4 volumes of Irish ancestors to Atlantic Canada, and any record where people were coming by ship or it was specifically about Irish. It really depends on what you mean there, because in Ireland itself.
She's looking for in Nova Scotia, she
in
says.
Nova Scotia? Okay, yeah. Good. Yeah, it's a lot harder. But it depends on where they were living, and it would depend on whether they were Protestant or whether they were Roman Catholic. And then you travel along the religious trail to the churches. And if somebody was born in the city of Halifax, there are quite a few different resources that you can look at. And some of them are, for example, on Family Search, the online database. They have a lot of records that haven't necessarily been indexed, but they're digitized, and they definitely have a lot of Roman Catholic churches in Halifax, and I have found birth or baptismal records in those. So you might want to give us a little more information on the website, and then or any records for that matter. Yeah. 84.
Yes, apparently picked the wrong time frame.
Those are the wrong eras, but there are ways to find. And if you have a little more information about the location, then I won't get into it today, but we'll get back to you.
I'll put the email address up there, Jennifer, and then you can have
and make sure you say it's for Peggy from the Facebook, because info is a broad.
Yeah, so that's just a catch-all email address. So put the subject for Peggy from Facebook Live, and then any information around it, any even details, helps everybody try to figure out what it is that we're all going for. So just let me write this down. I wrote it wrong. So we'll just move on here.
Okay.
So I have a couple more questions here. I want to go back. So Sherry says, can you read that? I have a lot of Reed family from Scotland that are Baptist.
Yeah. Oh, okay, so you're just sharing. I think she was sharing that information because she had talked about the Baptists, and I think that Baptists do not keep church records, right? So yes,
that's a bummer.
Yeah, the Baptists do not keep those, and it is there's no question there's a challenge. If you go on the Nova Scotia Archives website, then you may on the church records, and you can search to see what's available in the community that you're looking for by church records. The other thing we may have, I know we have a couple of resources in here that have Baptist records, and if you're in this area, then you can drop in to use the library. I also recommend that everybody, before they come, use the library catalog, where you can search by area, you can search by surname, or you can search by group, like New England Planters or Loyalists. And for example, there are at least 19 different resources on New England Planters in our library. Now, some of them will be family file type folders. And if you are a member, then we may be able to scan and email that to you. So it really, the thing is to ask the question, and just keep in mind that there are more services for members, as one would expect.
Yeah. So maybe you could sit back just a little bit, Peggy.
Yeah, okay.
We're getting the top, or not.
Top heavy, is that what you're saying?
No, you're cutting your head off. You don't want to do that.
Oh, well,
So the website is novascotiaancestors.ca. I'm Tressa Haney, and I'm interviewing Peggy Chapman, who's the vice chair, and knows lots of GANS and knows lots of information, and possibly can help point you in the right direction. We are touting the memberships, $39. Not bad, I don't think, because as the people that came in today and learned, for $39, they really did get a lot of information. And if you come if you're local, you can come into the library, and it's a library. It's a resource library. So there's all kinds of things to look at, books to look at. You mentioned Terry Punch, and there are a lot of books for sale here too. So you can order them online. or come in and get them locally.
Mm-hmm.
So if you are looking to get some books on different,
GANS
yeah,
publications.
yeah, and there's lots of books that lots of people have written. Um, so please keep putting your questions in the comments. It's really good to have all the conversation. Nobody must have known if it's Acadia Day because I haven't seen anything come up yet. So maybe it's not. I don't know.
Well, we can make it Acadia Day.
It's Acadia
Vive
Day.
l'Acadie!
There we go. There we go. Official.
Okay.
So let's move on
Yep.
to talking about something else. Is there something that's coming to your mind that you'd like to touch
In
on?
my mind, okay. I would, I would really like to talk about the library resources in general. I cannot emphasize enough how useful these can be in this day and age of digital resources and big subscription databases such as Ancestry. Of course, you have to use those, and you get to. It's usually the things that don't come easily are the things that you can find still in print material. And there's nothing like local histories or collections of transcriptions of things such as baptismal or church records that can help you to crack a brick wall. And as with any resource, if it isn't, it's a secondary. Anything that's transcribed in a book is a secondary resource, and they have different levels of credibility, but a lot of them are very credible depending on who did them. And then you just have to go. It's your clue, and all we're looking for to break a brick wall is some clues. The other thing, as our collection is growing, we're expanding the scope. We're not just going to have Nova Scotia, we also have other maritime or Newfoundland. And we also have getting to have a huge collection of New England resources, because many of you out there will know that it is definitely very close connections between New England and the maritime provinces. And I don't know of too many lines of descent or in research where you don't have to go to New England. And of course, there's a great interest in Mayflower families and things like that. So we're expanding our collections in those regards as well. And we really like you to come in and visit us if you're in the area. And the other thing, if you're not going to be in the area, if you're sitting there listening to us out in Arizona or somewhere, you can go on our library, use our terms to search through, and then you'd be surprised how many of these books might be available to you in your local area. You can go and then say, oh, I really want to get this book. Does my library have it? Does a university library have it? If, for example, you're living in Boston area, you just run down to the New England Historic and Genealogical Society, which has nearly all of the things that we have for the Maritimes.
Oh,
so it can
good.
it can be used in a non-traditional way to identify resources. And that is something that I think sometimes people overlook. You're very fortunate if you live in Boston. If you live elsewhere, you may not find everything there, but you may be able to do interlibrary loan, in which case you go to your library and you say, I really am interested in getting this book, and they have it in Boston, they have it in, Cincinnati or wherever, and they might be able to have an interlibrary loan agreement. We do not. I just want to point that out. We're not that official a library. So it can be used in many ways. Of course, it's always better if you can come in, but that's not available for everyone. But you will find that I don't know where Allen County is. It's in the U.S. somewhere in the Midwest, and it is got a huge collection. And who would think that they would have such a huge collection of Canadian resources? So don't assume that you won't be able to see that same book in an area near you.
Yeah.
And
Oh, that's
yeah.
really interesting because people wouldn't even think
They
about that
don't
probably.
often think. Yeah.
Yeah. So I have some more
And
things here. Oh, are you finished?
yep.
Oh, you sure? Okay.
I was just reading about August 15th is Acadia Day.
It is Acadia Day. So I have something from Ian Scott. I'm going to try to put it up on the screen, but sometimes it's
Okay.
really long. So sometimes, oh, yeah, it does. Clarification, please. I understand there are no infant baptismal records within the Baptist Church holdings since adult baptism is their standard practice, but marriage, death,
Right.
so
Right.
they don't keep.
I can't talk about what they do today, what is done today. I'm talking historically, and it is my understanding that there are very few records of any sort. If you are fortunate enough to have a person in your ancestry who was also a minister reverend in the Baptist church, then there will be lots of records apparently. It doesn't mean there's nothing. It just means that you're not going to be able to as easily, and that you cannot assume that if you can't find a marriage record that the people didn't marry.
Right.
It's just, and I can't give you in philosophy of the Baptist religion to explain why not, but that is my understanding, is the fact. No. Do you know if the Anglican Church will send copies of old records if requested? No. They will. They will not. And
You know
don't
it.
ask. No.
That's too bad.
No, but you know that these are all in Nova Scotia anyway. These are all pretty much on microfilm in the Nova Scotia archives in Halifax. And that is the arrangement that was made. Instead of opening their archives to the public, they've given them over to the Nova Scotia archives. And if you are not in the Halifax area, then you can look at lists of people who are connected to the website for the Nova Scotia Archives, and they can look up records for you. If it's the United Church, the United Church, which includes, of course, the Methodist, many of the Presbyterian, and some Congregationalists, and they amalgamated in 1925. All of those records are available through the United Church Archives, which is located in Sackville, New Brunswick, and they cover the Maritime provinces. And while they don't promote it, in most cases they will provide for you if you can provide the exact information. Otherwise, you can see a lot of their records as well at the Nova Scotia Archives.
So when people are looking, like I know people, maybe we touched on this in the beginning, but I forget, but if people are wanting to ask a question, even if you're a member of GANS and you want to email a question, what kind of information are you looking for? Like if somebody's trying to find somebody back in the 1800s and they're stuck, like what is good pieces?
So are you speaking of if somebody's sending in a query that they're hoping a volunteer will look at?
Yeah, explain how that works too.
Yeah,
it's
a little bit in transition at this point in time. But here, if you were going to send one today, then I would suggest the more you can't just ask vague. We do not undertake. For want of a better, free research. We can't undertake a huge amount of research on behalf of an individual. And then what would happen in that case is you would be referred to a list of people who have said that they will take research on for a fee because that, we will answer short snappers, as they used to say. We will answer if we are able to find the answer within our resources. We do not make trips to the Nova Scotia Archives. We look at what we have here in our resources.
Because this is a resource library. You're not researchers, right?
Yes, exactly. So you can send. Let's say you have you're looking for the parents of John Freeman, who was born in Liverpool in 1802. So you've got that fact from somewhere, and you're looking for the names of his parents. That's an example of something that is very precise. We know what you're looking for. Sometimes it's just like you see on Facebook groups for genealogy. Somebody will say, I'm looking for any information on the Freemans of Liverpool. No. We would go back to you and say, what Freeman? What is it specifically? So the more specific it is, the better.
That's good. Okay. Because a lot of questions do come in and
yes,
it's hard to, because it is volunteer driven. I mean, these are people that have learned and researched and educated themselves on how to do the research. So it's not like
it's not you're not hiring a researcher.
Yeah, exactly. So just let me check the comments because I think coming to thanks, Wayne. This is great. Wayne says, do you know Wayne?
Nope. I do now.
Thanks, Wayne. Okay, yeah, because it's really interesting, and I think people do get a lot of hearing how the context of how things work, not only at GANS, but like just
Yes.
researching and
Yeah.
people landing in Nova Scotia and where you can find different things.
Yes.
So, if people are interested in volunteering here, if you're
Mm-hmm.
local,
Mm-hmm.
what what kind of things do they do, and what kind of people are you
Right.
looking for,
And
really?
and it does vary a little bit depending on what our current need is and what our capacity is
Right.
to train and monitor, not monitor, but to help out the volunteer. So in February of this past year, we had an advertised information session where we brought people in and explained what our basic core needs are. Our basic core needs are very basic, and most of it surrounds, we need you to be computer literate, and that may seem an obvious thing, but it isn't always. And most of there's very few functions that we do that don't involve using the computer. And because we are a volunteer organization and we only have one staff member who's only part-time, there's not a lot of time for somebody to sit with you and oversee everything. We will at the beginning. We try and train you as well as possible. But some of the things that we're particularly interested in right now are people who would like to come and assist in the library. And as we, hi Pam, as we are moving along, we are doing more and more where people come into the library and there'll be a person or a couple of people here who will be able to not do their research, and they don't have to be experts in research, but they can help them navigate our collection, can give them some pointers. We are in the process of preparing some kind of navigation handout so people will be able to. So that's one. And you have to be willing to say commit to, a couple of days a month or something, specific
Yeah.
days for half a day. There will be some training provided, and you have to be somewhat confident that you have a fair bit of knowledge, not just your own family history, but a little bit, or maybe you're an old Nova Scotia descendant and you have families all over, and that's great because it is difficult if you only know one area. But that is a one that we really are always keen on. Other things, if you have a particular skill, say for example, you're a really, really good tech person and you can add some value. We have a tech advisor, but only one. And there are times when it would be really helpful to have somebody back up or who has a different skill set. And that's where you would just contact us and let us know, this is what I can do. Say you can do, you're really good at video recording and editing, say for example. So
That would
I
be a good
would,
one.
yeah, and we do have a need for that, and every so often we bring it up. And so if anyone's out there, and it doesn't mean you don't have to be physically here,
Right.
because once their contact is made and everybody agrees what you're doing, then you just work on it and send it to us. There are other things that we are doing, such as putting together collections of family histories, because one thing is, if somebody has done all kinds of research on more than one family, for example, and it fills up 500 pages, obviously that's not a family file. And that's where we're going to put it in binders if you don't already have it in binders. And we tend to make a table of contents, try to organize it. So if there's someone that likes to work on something like that, now it does require that you have to be physically here in the office. There's
Right.
the family files themselves. We're creating quite a few new ones. There's a process. They have to be we have to input information into our library database. And so that's another one that requires you to come in and do it, but you don't need, it's a quick study. So there are things like that. But if you have a very particular skill like editing or transcription, or always get in touch with us.
Awesome. Awesome. So I just want to, I think people aren't really sending in any more questions.
Okay.
So I just want to remind people to share the video because I think Peggy provided a lot of insight and context to what goes on. So we like to have some sharing of the video. The website is Nova Scotia
Ancestors.
Ancestors. I can type it fast enough. .ca. There you can find the resource library. You can sign up for membership. You can also purchase books like we talked about. There's all kinds of things that you can do. GANS is also a charity, so if you feel moved by what's happening here and all the volunteers and you want to donate money, please feel free to do that, because you've got to keep the doors open. If you want to contribute to a family file for your family, you can do that as well. Give us a call. The email is on the website. So all of those things are really what this place is about. It's about bringing resources together and sharing them, and helping each other, and it's a real community. So I think we kind of let everybody know that today. Do you have any closing thoughts or anything that you want to share?
I might just mention that, again, this is for both members and non-members, but from time to time we do present workshops on various topics, and they are usually open to everyone, but members will receive a discount on workshop. Just had to slide. So it's always good to keep checking the website from time to time. If you're a member, you'll receive notification anyway. But if you're not a member and you're in the metro area, then you may wish to. The one that I know we're having in the fall is the one on two workshops, respect to DNA, which is everybody's popular topic nowadays. But keep your eye open for others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can go back and watch the video when I unboxed a DNA kit. So then you can purchase your DNA kit, get it done, so you have your results, and then take the workshop to see how to apply it to your research and that kind of thing. And then we also have the Terry Punch event going on, and that's going to end. The date is slipping my mind right now.
October 23rd.
23rd. Okay, October 23rd at the Central Library in Halifax.
Yep.
Having a special speaker coming from my town, Ottawa.
Dr. Bruce Elliott.
Yeah, so that's going to be a great event. There's only seating for 300. We expect it to be full. So if you want to come, please do. It would be really great to have.
No cost.
No cost. It's free. So, and Terry Punch is, if you Google him, you will find out that he's kind of a leader in the genealogical research realm in Nova Scotia, for sure.
Exactly.
And a founder of GANS.
GANS, and very big on Irish research for those who are interested in Irish.
So one last thing I want to say is, many moons ago, we talked about Cape Breton and Cape Breton names. And you said to me one time, hey, maybe we should get some more Cape Breton names because we don't have a lot. So do you want to speak really briefly? My laptop might die. So if you want to speak really briefly on that, that'd be great.
About getting some, I'm not sure, like you mean getting more participants from Cape Breton or more members, getting people sending in their family files. We would love more Cape Breton family files. Yorkshire settlers, that's a good one. Somebody just put a post up there. That's a very interesting. We do have some books on the Yorkshire settlers here. There's very interesting. We don't have time to talk about that today, but if you go in our library database and go, you will find information on Yorkshire settlers. But Cape Breton, we are lacking Cape Breton family files. Or if you have done, or if you've done a binder for a name, and as you know, there's so many Cape Breton names that are similar that it's always a challenge when people have Cape Breton roots and they haven't lived in Cape Breton for 2 generations and they're trying to find out which of the McKays is their McKay.
Yeah. So probably a lot of lines of McKays and McDonalds and McPhersons. Everything.
Yes. McDonald is the most common name in Nova Scotia.
Is it? Really? Oh, interesting. Well, on that note, I'm going to go because my laptop is screaming at me that I better get off.
Okay.
So thank you, everybody, for watching. Please comment, leave where you're watching from, share the video. We love to hear it. We'll go back and look through more comments. And who knows? This seemed to be pretty popular. We might do this again. So thank you very much, Peggy.
Yep. Thank you. And it was great to talk with everyone.
It was great. Okay.
Bye.